Imagine boarding a jetliner, sipping complimentary coffee and gazing out at the clouds, unaware that the fuel powering your flight was, just months prior, flushed down a city sewer. Sound crazy? It might be the most game-changing development in the battle against climate change. This isn't a quirky sci-fi scenario or a corporate PR stunt. It's happening right now, and it could redefine not just aviation, but the entire global energy landscape. In 2024, Wizz Air, one of Europe's fastest-growing airlines, signed a headline-grabbing deal to power its flights with fuel made, in part, from treated human waste. The world snickered at the idea of jets fueled by poop. But as the laughter faded, a deeper truth emerged. This deal signals the start of a new era, an era where the stuff we throw away, from city sewage to banana peels, could hold the key to decarbonizing one of humanity's dirtiest sectors, aviation. Aviation accounts for roughly 2 to 3% of global CO2 emissions. That might not sound huge until you realize that the industry is set to double over the next 2 decades, with billions more passengers taking to the skies. Unlike cars or buses, which are rapidly electrifying, jetliners can't just swap their engines for batteries. The laws of physics and chemistry are far harsher at 30,000 feet. That's made aviation the Achilles heel of green technology and a looming climate risk. But now, waste-fed sustainable aviation fuel, SAF, offers a surprising lifeline. The story behind it is complex, messy, and filled with stubborn misconceptions. And beneath the surface lies a fierce conflict. Can we truly power the age of flight using the stuff we once called garbage? Or is the promise of SAF just another fleeting fantasy, destined to crash against the hard realities of economics, technology, and supply chains? To understand why poop-powered planes could change everything, we first need to examine how we got here. For decades, the aviation industry seemed almost immune to the clean energy revolution sweeping the ground below. While electric cars zipped onto highways and solar panels covered rooftops, jet fuel remained stubbornly unchanged, a relic of the 20th century, refined from oil and belching out CO2 at 10 tons per transatlantic flight. The first experiments with alternative fuels date back over 15 years. In 2008, a commercial jet made history by taking flight with a blend of biofuel and kerosene. By 2011, regulators allowed airlines to operate flights with up to 50% biofuel blends. Early optimism soared, but reality quickly grounded those dreams. The first generation of biofuels, like corn ethanol or palm oil biodiesel, was fraught with controversy. Critics warned of food versus fuel trade-offs, deforestation, and rising food prices as farmland was diverted to grow fuel crops rather than feeding people. As Dr. Jennifer Holmgren, CEO of LanzaTech, put it, we must move beyond a linear take-make-dispose model and embrace carbon recycling to create a truly sustainable future for aviation. The industry's early missteps stoked a powerful misconception that every attempt to green aviation would come at the cost of rainforests or dinner plates. And as the world lurched from one food crisis to another, sustainable aviation fuel became a catchphrase for corporate greenwashing rather than real progress. But the story didn't end there. As scientists, engineers, and entrepreneurs dug deeper, they realized the planet was already awash in untapped, sustainable feedstocks, not on farmland, but in our cities, forests, and farms. Municipal waste, agricultural byproducts, wastewater sludge, even the gas from landfills. These overlooked resources could be converted into high-value fuels. By 2024, projects around the world were proving this idea was more than a laboratory fantasy. Fulcrum Bioenergy's Sierra Biofuels plant near Reno, Nevada, began converting city garbage into syncrude, destined for the jet tanks of major airlines. SkyNRG's demonstration facility in the Netherlands started producing SAF from sustainably sourced sugars. LanzaTech turned waste gases into jet fuel at its Freedom Pines Fuels plant in Georgia, boasting an 80% emissions cut compared to fossil jet fuel. And in the UK, Velocys's Altalto project prepared to turn household trash into 60 million liters of SAF annually. These advances marked a dramatic shift in the energy calculus. No longer were we constrained by a world where every cleaner molecule of fuel demanded fresh land, more deforestation, and painful trade-offs. Instead, it was about recycling the billions of tons of waste our cities and industries generate every year. Waste that, unmanaged, threatens to pour methane and CO2 into the atmosphere anyway. Astonishingly, estimates suggest that at conservative yields, the world's mismanaged food, forestry, and municipal waste streams could supply over 500 million tons of low-carbon fuel annually. That's more than enough to meet what remains of global liquid fuel demand for hard-to-electrify sectors, especially if ground transport, rail, and short-haul flights make major advances in electrification. The future, for once, looked like a win-win. But there's another layer. The myth that the world will always need more and more liquid fuels, jet fuel, diesel, bunker oil, than we can possibly replace. The numbers say otherwise. Detailed modeling predicts that as cars, buses, and trucks electrify, and as high-speed rail accelerates, global demand for liquid fuels could drop by over 80% in the coming decades. What's left concentrates in the aviation and shipping sectors, long-haul, hard-to-electrify journeys where batteries just aren't practical yet. So the battle lines are drawn. Thread a narrow technological and logistical needle, and you could power every jetliner flying across the globe with trash-derived fuel. No new farmland, no food crisis, no greenwashing. Fail, and aviation could become the climate villain of the 21st century. Yet even as the chemistry and feedstocks fall into place, another complication looms. Many energy pundits have argued that renewable electricity, wind and solar, will become so cheap that they'll make liquid fuels obsolete altogether. Why bother with complicated biochemical conversions when clean electrons could run everything, or turn into hydrogen and synthetic fuels at will? Here's where reality bites. While wind and solar have driven the marginal costs of electricity down, the real-world costs of providing steady, high-quality power, especially in places with extreme peaks and troughs, are far from zero. Surplus power is often isolated in time and geography, useless unless you're lucky enough to have a factory next to a solar farm when the sun's blazing. For high-capacity industrial processes like hydrogen electrolysis or synthetic fuel synthesis, you need reliable, around-the-clock power, something the current grid isn't equipped to deliver without vast investment. This isn't just theory. Multiple regions trying to build green hydrogen economies have discovered that relying on surplus renewables spikes capital costs and strains infrastructure. Electrolyzers sit idle, and the price per kilogram of hydrogen remains stubbornly high. Even Marco Alvará, CEO of Tree Energy Solutions and a self-professed e-fuel optimist, admits, e-fuels are essential to decarbonize aviation as they can be directly dropped in existing long-haul aircraft without the need to redesign them, but only if we solve the cost and scale puzzle at the grid level. So, the case for advanced SAF, especially waste-based SAF, grows stronger. And it's not just a European or American story. Across the globe, from the US to the Netherlands, Sweden to Singapore, companies are vying to scale up production, unlock new feedstocks, and drive down costs. Technologies like hydrotreated esters and fatty acids, HEFA, alcohol-to-jet, ATJ, and Fischer-Tropsch synthesis are moving from pilot stage to commercial reality. The competition is fierce, and the stakes are enormous. Yet, immense barriers stand in the way. First, price. Sustainable aviation fuel can cost between 2 and 5 times as much as kerosene derived from fossil oil. Even with the best tech, the cheapest production methods, like SkyNRG's direct sugar-to-long-chain hydrocarbons, still target $600 to $800 per ton. LanzaTech, Fulcrum, and others are fighting to narrow this gap, but the economics are brutal, especially for low-cost airlines. Second, supply. Nancy Young of Airlines for America sums it up. SAF is the most promising pathway to decarbonize aviation, but scaling production requires supportive policies and investment incentives. Right now, global SAF production covers just a fraction of the industry's voracious appetite. While Neste managed to boost its output to 1.5 million tons per year by early 2025, that's a drop in the jet fuel ocean. Third, logistics and infrastructure. Airports, pipelines, and fuel systems have been built for a single type of fuel. Swapping to SAF isn't as simple as flipping a switch, especially when strict safety, quality, and blending standards must be met. Policymakers are scrambling to update regulations, but bureaucracy moves slower than jetliners. Finally, feedstock competition. Waste is not a limitless resource, as airlines, freight companies, and even the maritime sector clamor for a slice of the sustainable pie. Experts warn of looming bottlenecks. Sean Newsom, VP at Neste, is candid. To unlock the full potential of SAF, we need a combination of readily available sustainable feedstocks, innovative technologies, and clear policy frameworks. And so, the race is on. Will advanced waste-based fuels scale up fast enough to transform the industry? Will production costs plummet And will governments step in with the right incentives? Or will bold visions for a poop-powered aviation revolution stutter and stall, delayed by stubborn economics, policy hurdles, and the messy realities of industrial supply chains? As we peer into the future, one question looms larger than any other. Does the world truly have the political and economic will to turn waste, human, animal, and otherwise, into the fuel that keeps humanity flying high? Or, despite all the innovation, are we chasing a dream that's always just out of reach? The next chapter will reveal what it will really take to bring this revolution to cruising altitude and who stands to win or lose if the winds shift. But what happens next? If the first act of the sustainable aviation fuel story is innovation and early adoption, the next is about scaling up, and it's an act filled with both promise and peril. Let's start by imagining a world where waste-powered jets become the norm. It's more plausible than you might think. We already have airlines like Wizz Air, KLM, and United Airlines signing binding deals for waste-based SAF. Fulcrum Bioenergy's plant in Nevada is set to produce millions of gallons of jet fuel by refining literal garbage. Neste in Finland converts used cooking oil and animal fat into high-spec aviation fuel, 1.5 million tons per year by 2025. Every few months, new projects launch in the UK, France, Australia. The trickle is turning into a stream, but will it become a river? Picture airports where delivery trucks offload fuels that started life as last night's leftovers, forestry scraps, or even the, let's say, byproducts of city living. Imagine towns that once saw their landfill mounds grow, now watching waste streams become valuable energy resources. Landfills shrink, pollution drops, and airports become centers of circular carbon economies. Yet for every optimistic projection, there's a harsh reality check. The cost of producing waste-derived SAF, currently between 2 and 5 times that of fossil jet fuel, remains stubbornly high. SkyNRG's demonstration plant in the Netherlands targets $600, $800 per ton of SAF, which sounds like progress, until you realize it still can't compete on price with fossil kerosene selling for as little as $300 or $400 per ton at times. And it's not just the sticker price that matters. Collecting, transporting, and pre-processing vast piles of waste is a logistical headache. Municipal solid waste isn't always clean or consistent. Biosolids can be tricky to dry and handle. Turning raw waste into refined, aircraft-grade fuel requires a symphony of technology: hydroprocessing, gasification, Fischer-Tropsch synthesis, fermentation. Each step has its own costs and quirks. Regulation remains a powerful lever, but also a stubborn bottleneck. In Europe, mandates are rolling out that require airlines to blend increasing amounts of SAF into their fuel supply, with steep penalties for non-compliance. The U.S. has its renewable fuel standard, but political winds can shift suddenly. What happens if subsidies and incentives are slashed during a budget crisis? Will investors pull back? Will promising plants be mothballed before they reach scale? There's another aspect: competition. As demand for waste feedstocks grows, so does the risk of overpromising supply. Waste that could go toward making SAF can also be burned for power, turned into renewable diesel, or even used as fertilizer. If multiple industries chase the same feedstocks, prices will rise, and sustainability claims may get blurry. Will we see true waste utilization, or just a new kind of resource squeeze? And let's not forget technology's wild card. Exciting methods like power-to-liquid fuels, where CO2 is captured straight from the air and converted to synthetic kerosene using green electricity, are advancing rapidly. Carbon engineering and LanzaJet are piloting exactly this, aiming for near-zero or even negative emissions flights. If costs fall, these high-tech routes could leapfrog simpler waste-to-fuel pathways. But today, power-to-liquid fuels remain prohibitively expensive and incredibly energy-hungry. Even their most enthusiastic backers admit we're years away from mass adoption. So, the future could branch in several directions. 1. Waste-powered flights take off for good, supported by smart policy, steady investment, and relentless technical improvements. SAF production scales up, and aviation emissions finally break their upward curve. Net zero by 2050 becomes more than a slogan, it's a plan. 2. Feedstock bottlenecks and cost pressures slow progress. SAF remains a luxury, used by top-tier airlines and shimmering on the pages of sustainability reports, but never reaching the mass market. The mainstream aviation world sticks with fossil fuel or pivots to other decarbonization tricks, offsets, operational improvements, or simply fewer flights. 3. A technological leap, like cheap, abundant power-to-liquid SAF, or a breakthrough in algae or microbial conversion, transforms the playing field. Waste is still valuable, but it's one feedstock among many in a much broader toolkit. What are the consequences of each pathway? If waste-based SAF becomes mainstream, the climate dividend could be huge. Aviation accounts for 2 to 3% of global CO2 emissions, but is one of the fastest-growing sectors. SAF can cut life cycle emissions up to 80%, dramatically reducing the industry's carbon footprint. It could also lessen methane pollution from decaying waste. Each ton of biosolids turned to fuel is a ton less contributing to greenhouse gases in landfills or wastewater lagoons. But if we falter, the aviation sector could become stranded, squeezed between consumer pressure, government mandates, and technological dead ends. The risk isn't just environmental, it's economic. Airlines slow to embrace the change may lose out to competitors who made the jump, while countries that fail to build SAF capacity watch others dominate a valuable new market. So what does all this mean for you, the viewer right now, someone who may not own an airline or run a waste treatment plant? First, realize that this is far more than a technical sideshow. The way we manage our waste, the policies we support, and even the flights we book are all part of a wider ecosystem. Waste to fuel is a technological marvel, but it's also an urgent system shift toward a more circular economy, one where waste truly becomes resource and every carbon molecule is counted and reused. If you work in policy, business, or environmental advocacy, pushing for strong SAF mandates and incentives isn't just about protecting the planet, it's about capturing economic opportunity. Supporting local pilots or community-scale waste-to-SAF facilities could mean new jobs, cleaner neighborhoods, and global leadership. If you're a traveler, keep an eye out as more airlines offer options to buy SAF offsets or fly on routes partially powered by waste-derived fuels. Some major carriers are already letting passengers pay a bit extra to support SAF purchases. Yes, even if the actual molecules don't end up in your plane's tank, you're helping scale demand and infrastructure. It may seem small, but these choices aggregate. The more passengers demand cleaner flights, the more airlines and policymakers are forced to accelerate change. Even at the household level, waste segregation and local composting feed into the supply chain of advanced biofuels. In the coming decade, some of your food scraps, or more awkwardly, your biosolids, might well be crossing continents in the tank of a transatlantic plane. Suddenly, waste is no longer invisible. It's fuel for the future. The lesson? Don't buy the myth that cleaner aviation is impossible. Don't let the taste of yesterday's failed biofuel experiments sour your appetite for what's next. The more you ask questions, where did this fuel come from? What impact does my travel have? The quicker the industry moves forward. And finally, the future of waste-powered flight isn't just about the environment, it's about resilience. An industry that relies on global oil supply chains is exposed to price shocks, wars, and political instability. Waste, by contrast, is everywhere. Every city, every farm, every restaurant generates it. If we can master the art of turning trash into jet fuel, we decentralize energy, create local jobs, and insulate ourselves from the volatility of a fossil-fueled world. So, to return to the big question, will technology, policy, and economics converge in time to make waste-powered flight mainstream? The answer is, they are already converging, but the outcome is not guaranteed. We're watching a race between innovation and inertia, between bold investments and business as usual. The finish line, scaled, affordable, global SAF, can be crossed. But it will take more than clever engineering. It will require relentless pressure from below, courageous bets from above, and yes, a willingness to rethink our attitudes toward waste itself. And here's a final secret worth knowing. The unsung champion of this revolution might be something as humble as the local wastewater plant. That unremarkable facility in your neighborhood, the one few people want to think about, could someday power the planes overhead. In a decade or two, airports may source their jet fuel not from distant oil fields, but from the byproducts of nearby cities. If that sounds like science fiction, remember, almost every disruptive innovation starts out that way. So next time you see a plane taking off, ask yourself, is it still flying on the past or soaring on yesterday's waste? The story isn't finished. Its ending will be written by all of us. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the future of sustainable aviation, hit the like button, subscribe for more stories that fly above the headlines, and share your thoughts in the comments. What excites you about waste to fuel?